see that it says recording, is it? Oh, there you go. Okay. Yep, there we go. All right, so we're going to get started here, and I'm going to start out by sharing my screen just to go over some things about the website. And I'm going to actually, turn my camera off. So for those of you who are not aware, this is our website. The forum's website. It was kind of overhauled a couple of years ago, and it's got lots of good information on it. Any questions you have about the forum should be answered here. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys. And I feel like there's another announcement I need to make at the beginning, but just letting everyone know that your attendance at the meeting, if you attend, is that 1 or 2 meetings per year? We usually have 4 meetings per year. Then you're eligible to run for a seat on the executive committee. And we have 10 members of the executive committee, and I will just review the that here. Actually, let me go to the agenda first here. This is our meeting agenda for today. We've got we'll do constituency group updates and task force reports. Then we'll have time for announcements, and then we'll have a scheduled presentation. Our topics, we have 4 people on the agenda. The topic is surveying, and we'll get to that after we do the business forum business. So let me see here. So I was showing you the website and the executive committee. Here's the makeup, the 10 members of it, and we're just gonna go through. We'll start with our GIO, which is Brian, for his update.
Morning, everybody. Not too much from us this time. We are in the process of doing our monthly release of road data and address data covering the whole state. The team is working on that, and that will be up on the Engine website within the next few days. Quite a bit of changes, just looking at the change count numbers. We've updated over 43,000 address points. If that's something that is of interest to you, check out the Engine website for that. And then also a plug for the forum website that we're looking at on that homepage that Trish had up earlier. Just a reminder, there's a membership registration link there, right? So real important for you guys to keep your membership current. Really all we need is all it really asks for is like your name and your email address. And that goes into our membership database, and that's how we track who you are. If we need to send notifications, it's also how we use that to help track attendance. Like Trish said, that's important if you want to run for an exec committee seat in the future. Also makes you eligible for voting. So please keep that up to date. You know, if you change careers, your email address changes, try to remember to go back and update that info for us. Some really cool stuff about elevation, but I'll let the elevation task force share that good news later. That's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Next up is I'm gonna give a very brief report from the federal government, and the news is that our FEMA rep, Julia O'Brien, told me yesterday that today was going to be her last Geospatial Forum meeting representing FEMA. So, because she's retiring on May 20th, so exciting for her. And her replacement will be Avram Shepard. He's Emergency Management Specialist, GIS, for FEMA, for Region 2 there. So, I know what's that?
Congratulations, Julia.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for your help over the years.
Yep.
Thank you.
And you're welcome to come back, like others we know who are on our meetings, or
like possibly Mr. Rowan.
Right.
Yes. And actually, I might just mention that we hoping to have our June meeting in person. So could be a nice reunion in person, finally getting together in person for these meetings. But yeah, so Abram Shepard is the new FEMA rep. And we welcome him and hope to hear from him throughout the year. So that's the federal announcement. Actually, I will mention that the federal COVID what do you call it? Emergency. I don't know what the technical term is, but it's going to be lifted on May 11th or something like that. So after that, federal government should be operating a little more back to normal. I don't know. It depends on where you are in the country, but it has depended. Each state and each region has had different requirements for during the COVID emergency. So hopefully that will be going away for us, and things will be more normal. That's
Trish?
yep.
Hi, this is Roger. I just wanted to mention
Oh.
something from the USGS side on federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Just a reminder to folks that the NHD, the National Hydrographic Data Set, is now shut down. And the watershed boundary data set is still open for corrections until the end of June this year. This is all part of the transition to the 3D hydrography program, the melding of all those things together, and the simplification of all the coding and feature codes that have been there. There will be a static version of the 3D HP put up in the fall until we get everything kind of up and running. I will say that the new HydroAdd tool has a better capability than the previous suite of tools that were Esri-based and needed constant updating. So we'll be moving those things forward as time goes on, and hopefully will be functional by the end of the calendar year. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Thanks, Roger. I was not aware of that, but that's good stuff to know. And I'm just checking, is Matt Duffy on the call? Okay, Matt's our secretary, and I think he said he couldn't make all of this morning's meeting, but this meeting's being recorded, so I'm gonna go back and take notes on what you said there, Roger, because that sounds important. Thank you. All right. Okay, so that's the federal government update. We're going to go down the list again. I'm going to share here. So the next report. Well, you know what? If you don't have a report, that's fine. I just want to let everyone know who our reps are. New Jersey University College and K-12 institutions. That's Zach Chrisman. I don't know, Zach, if you have an update for us, anything you want to say?
Hello, everyone. This is my first spring meeting here, but no report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next is another new rep to the executive committee for the municipal government, and that's John Hainsworth from Cherry Hill. John, you just want to say hello, or if you have an announcement, that's great.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be part of the executive committee, and I believe I have all the listserv issues sorted on my end, so everything should be making through the firewall now. So expect a welcome email and perhaps a brief questionnaire trying to figure out what kind of projects and topics would suit the group for discussions. So I just look forward to working with you all.
Great. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, okay. The next is our county government rep. That's Matt, and I'm pretty sure Matt is not on. Matt, if you're there, he's with Atlantic City, for those who don't know Matt, but he'll be joining us on the executive committee for the first time. All right, then state government rep is also new, Scott Costello of NJDOT. Scott, you want to say hello?
Hello. Just want to thank everyone for joining the meeting today. I do have a few announcements for state stuff. One is, yes, it's that time of year. It's not just April with the Bring Your Kids to Work Day coming. It is actually time for the 35th annual New Jersey DEP GIS mapping contest. The contest will be held Thursday, April 20th at 10 a.m. It'll be in person at the DEP headquarters, the public hearing room in Trenton. Enter your map, see the maps developed by GIS users from around the state. Winning maps have gone on to win international competitions and have been published in the Esri map book. This year, you may enter your map in any one relevant category, regardless of whether it's a web application or paper map, whatever. Contestants will present their work in person at DEP. Spectators are welcome to attend in person or virtually through Teams. You can see all the registration information and details on the Bureau GIS page on DEP's website. Let's see. And another announcement is, speaking of maps, I don't know if you guys saw, but it's about a month or so ago, there was a rash of news about the influx of interest with young folks in paper maps. So that makes me happy because NJDOT just released the new 2023 state map. It's in this portable, low-tech mobile format. You can get it at rest areas along the highways, or you can order them directly through the mail at New Jersey Tourism's website. For state folks, if you just contact me directly, I can inter-office a copy to you. And there's the full version on the wall behind me. And just to plug a little more DOT stuff, it may not be outwardly evident, but we're hard at work trying to bolster our public GIS presence. And we're working hard in the background to get that stuff ready. And you should be seeing stuff before the next Geospatial Forum meeting. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I was not aware that young people were interested in paper maps, but that's
Yeah, it's
cool to
amazing.
hear. And I did notice a map behind you. Very nice. Okay, cool. All right. Our next rep is private sector, and that's Kaylin Doherty with the with Civil Solutions. I'm not sure. I think Kaylin said he was not. If Kalen's on, you have a moment? I think he told me he would be absent. So just for folks, if you're in the private sector, Kalen is your rep. And then we have regional authorities and MPOs, and that's who's that? Mark Addy. I know I saw Mark. Mark, if you want to say hello, if you have any announcements.
Yes, hi. I'm with DBRPC over in Philly. I got word that SJI, which is the utility that runs Elizabethtown Gas and South Jersey Gas, has been acquired by a private investment fund, IIF, the Infrastructure Investments Fund. And then on the GIS side, they report that they have both Elizabethtown Gas and South Jersey Gas have completed their migration to Esri utility network, and they have completed their utilities and pipeline data model, the UPDM, with an in-house enterprise of 10.9.1. DVRPC finally closed the RFP for their land use update last week, and we are in the process of selecting a vendor. We hope to have it approved at our board meeting either in March, or it's looking now more like April, but hopefully that'll get started soon and we'll have a product for 2020 and 2022, hopefully about a year.
Okay. Great. Thanks for that update, Mark. Next up, we have the 501c3 NGO rep, and that's Tanya, Tanya Nolte with New Jersey Conservation Foundation, right? Tanya, I'm not sure if you're on. Okay, I don't think I heard from her, but many of you know Tanya. She's been on the committee for a while, and she's very helpful and been involved in a lot of things, getting things done for the state. All right, next up is the surveyors, New Jersey licensed professional land surveyors, and that is our rep there is Gary. Gary
Hello,
Lindstrom.
everyone. Yes, thank you. Not a lot to announce. We just last week was our annual conference at Atlantic City, so that was an exciting time. Meeting up with a lot of old friends and getting a little bit smarter. So that was successful, and looking forward this month for Surveyors Week. National Surveyors Week is the 20th of March, so there'll be some special events for that too. So if you want to look out for that.
Okay, great. Good to hear you guys are meeting, and welcome to the board. I know you've been on for a little bit, so good to have you. So next on the agenda, actually, let me go back to the agenda here, is task force reports. So Roger, did you have anything to add to this for the elevation task
yes.
force? Yeah, okay.
Oh, yes. We have
Okay.
a big positive announcement. So through the good work of John Tarosky at DEP and Doug Schleifer at OIT, I'm very pleased to announce that we have come to a signed joint funding agreement with DEP, and USGS should sign it either today or tomorrow for quality level 1 LiDAR in the 6 northeastern counties. That is Bergen, Essex, Hudson, Union, Middlesex, and Monmouth counties. The proposal was accepted in early January, the broad agency announcement proposal, and it stated the request for quality level 2 plus. The amount of funding offered by New Jersey was so high that USGS felt that the uplift to QL1 would be of minimal effort and great benefit to both parties. Also keeping in mind that Next Generation 911 is looking towards QL1 needs for building height and building outlines. And with that said, the project that I just mentioned will be tide coordinated, and that will bring tide coordination for the LiDAR from Bergen County in the Hudson all the way around to the south coast through Salem County in southeast Jersey. So that's a real benefit. We're also getting machine generated building outlines for structures larger than 400 square feet. So there is an added building classification, build points classification for buildings. So some real upgrades for this collection of LiDAR, which replaces the old Hurricane Sandy 2014 QL2 data. In addition, New Jersey, as is usually done in every case that I've been involved in, is the independent QA/QC. So some independent firm will have a look at the data to verify that everything is there, should be there, and that any egregious errors will be accounted for and removed and corrected. I think that's there. We're hoping for a spring collection. We're pushing the limits of that here. If not, it'll go to the fall. I have an announcement, and that is that I intend to retire on June 17th, and I will be needing to resign my position as chair of the Elevation Task Force, which I've been in since 2007. My replacement is going to be Eliza Gross, who is the current Pennsylvania-New York liaison. So she's going to add New Jersey to the mix, and she's based out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And she may be tuning in now and riding the rails from Pittsburgh to Harrisburg. So I don't know if she's on or not.
Hi, Roger. I'm on.
Excellent. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be at the June NJGF meeting yet. There's a conference in Portland, Oregon that I may be going to, but I'm hoping that Eliza can join. And I would be happy to introduce her to this group. I do want to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed working with the New Jersey folks as long ago as 1990, when I met Larry Thornton and Craig Koutros and John Tarosky at that time. And we ended up finally getting the New Jersey National Aerial Photography Program project for the state of New Jersey in 1994.
Wow.
4-color, 4-band on actual film in those days. So it's been a great ride, and I have made some wonderful friends in New Jersey, and I really appreciate everybody's help and partnership over that period of time. So thank you, and I hope to see you in June.
Great. Yeah. Congrats, Roger. I knew that was coming up as well. So yeah, we're definitely we do hope to you stay in touch, and it has been it's going to be hard, having our meetings without you. You always have good news, and that was some really good news there. So thank you for that, and welcome to Eliza. And I do want to say something about the June meeting. I think I said we're going to try to have it in person, and that's our lightning. We usually have in June, every other year, we do lightning talks. So we're going to try to do that this June. But I know some people have, preferred the Zoom meetings. The Teams format, just because they can't always get to the meeting in person. I think we're going to try to figure some options out for that. But for now, just know that you'll be receiving a notice regarding the June meeting and lightning talks. And so if you have something to present, some idea, some project you've been working on that you want to share, June is the time to do that. And we look forward to those, to that meeting. All right, I think I am done with the agenda, which I've still got up here. Yeah, and we're to the the part of the meeting where we have our scheduled speaker and presentation. So this topic, GIS and surveying, I cannot remember the last time we had someone from the surveying group present to us. Maybe we did, but I'm really looking forward to today, because I think everyone in GIS at some point in their career, I would hope, has to understand surveying and what it's about and how it differs from what we do, or how it's the same. So Gary proposed this topic for today, and he pulled together these the 4 presenters, panelists, and Gary, I'm going to let you introduce them, and I do have their names and titles up here, but yeah, you guys, if you're ready, you can share and get started.
We're ready to go, Trish. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah, I hope I don't disappoint now that you led into that. So again, I'll start out by just introducing myself. Gary Veenstra. I'm a licensed land surveyor in the state of New Jersey. I'm part of the Geospatial Forum. I've been on, this is actually my second run on the executive board, representing land surveyors in New Jersey. I'm the liaison from the board to the utility task force and also the geodetic task force, which I've been helping along sort of as a co-chair. Edith Konopka had been running that. She's retiring along with everyone else, it seems like, on the call. But we're going to get that up and running in the geodetic, because like I had said prior, we just had a survey conference, and again, the discussion was about the new datum, and that's 2025 is the set time for that. So you'll be seeing more information as we move forward, coming from the geodetic task force on that datum. So a couple of things we're trying to accomplish today. I just wanted to, and I had tried to introduce this to the executive committee, and just said, I've learned so much about the GIS community. I thought maybe I would just share a little bit about surveyors, what we do, what it takes to become a surveyor. So we'll talk a little bit about the state definitions for a land surveyor, some of the regulation standards, and some other interesting items, hopefully, throughout the conversation. This is going to be an open conversation. My colleague and someone I've worked closely with here at Neglia Group is Rich Caprio. He's taught me a tremendous amount regarding GIS. He's going to be the moderator of this discussion. We're also going to be joined by Mark Ashton and John Thomas from NJDEP, the Green Acres section. Mark is the surveyor, and John is on the GIS side. So we're going to go through. I'll let Rich take it from here. He'll introduce himself and just kind of give you a rundown on what we're going to be speaking about today, and we'll go from there. All yours, Rich.
Thank you, Gary. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I think you can all see my screen. So quick background for me. This is my 5th year here at Neglia working with Gary. Previously worked in municipal and county government. I've been a part of the forum for many years, and most recently joined the new utilities task force. So I'm thankful that we have this opportunity to talk to you all today. We're going to continually do some introductions as we go, but I'm going to start with a little agenda here. So like Gary said, we're going to start out with a lot of background on surveying. Gary's going to try and make it as interesting as possible throughout, but talk about the licensing. He's going to go through a bunch of definitions and work through some of the standards that exist in surveying, of which there are many. A lot of these terms we'll see will be something familiar to all of us. So it'll be good to get the definitions from the surveying side. And then towards the latter part of our presentation, we're going to be talking with Mark and John, specifically to learn about their workflow, and then learn about workflows in general between surveyors and GIS professionals. It'll be good to get a couple different perspectives there. We'll likely open up the conversation to everybody here around that time, and we'll discuss a couple use cases, whether it's tax maps, flood data, and some specific survey methods as well. So as we go, feel free to enter questions on the side in the chat, and we'll likely get to those all at the end. If we have time in between, or the time seems right, we'll try and address those questions as they come in. But we're going to leave some time at the end for questions and a little bit more discussion from anybody who's interested. So before we jump into it, my background of why I think this meeting is important from a GIS perspective is when I came here to Neglia, GIS was kind of new as far as a full-time position here at Neglia. So I was walking in as a GIS person into, the lines then of survey, because not only was I working for and with a licensed surveyor, there was other licensed surveyors on staff. There were field surveyors who went out to collect data who had always worked for a licensed surveyor. People who were in the office drafting that work who had always worked for a surveyor. So I was really coming into this as like a new toy. Nobody really knew what to do with GIS. So as I had to be able to teach them about what we do. And the only way I could do that is by really learning the survey perspective and learning as much as I could about those definitions, so I can kind of etch myself in. And what we're going to be talking about through this presentation is really 4 or 5 years worth of those conversations that I've had with Gary and everyone else here in surveying, kind of into this conversation here, so that everybody, at least from a surveying perspective, has a better understanding. We've all been through this either with other engineers or other departments. I know GIS pops around many departments in the public and private sector, whether it's planning, engineering, health even, and IT for the most part. So in our case, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to my experiences, and we hope you get a lot out of this. So to start off, I'm going to keep this agenda up for a little bit, but definitely send it back to Gary if, Gary, you want to start and provide some background on yourself personally and professionally.
Sure, I'll just give you a little background of how long I've been in surveying. I graduated from NJIT in Newark, actually with a civil engineering degree. They didn't have surveying degree when I first started. They do now. And so then once I started my engineering job, I was actually put on the survey crew. That was for my first internship. I was hired once I finished college, and I continued with that. I kind of kicked and screamed a little bit going in because I had been going to school for engineering, and why am I doing all the surveying? But I ended up falling in love with the profession and sort of never looked back. So I've been licensed since 1992. Just about the time where they changed the rules where you needed the bachelor's degree in surveying. So I've been surveying for over 30 years in various companies. It's something I love. It's something I never knew of going in, but I couldn't imagine at this point doing anything else. So that's when I talk to high school students or anybody interested in opening up a field. It's a field where you can work in, whether it's you go to college and get a degree, or you just want to work and college isn't your thing. There's a career path for both in surveying. It's not a popular one, but it's much needed. So we're always looking for good candidates. So I'm involved with the State Society. Also, I'm a director. Held a few leadership positions there with the State Society, New Jersey Society of Professional Land Surveyors. And I'm currently the Trig Star coordinator. What that is it's a high school contest. It's from the National Society of Professional Surveyors. They have what's called a Trig Star contest. It's a trigonometry exam that they take and they compete nationwide. So I'm the state coordinator for that. And I've also worked in the past with implementing the CST program in New Jersey. It's the Certified Survey Technician. So if you didn't go to college and you want to move on in your career, you can move up several levels through the CST program. It's recognized by DOT and different other agencies. It just helps people move along, in their career. So it's just another thing that I've been involved with. When I started here at Neglia about 6 years ago, we had a part-time GIS person, and we had one project, wasn't going very well, and I knew we needed to up our game a bit. So the first thing I did was join the Geospatial Forum. I figured that was, just a good avenue for me to learn about GIS, and it certainly was. I have, attended the MAC EURISA events. I've learned a ton from them, and I just went to as many meetings as I could. I went to as many workshops as I could, just to learn what the geospatial community does. And I've said this at the executive board, and I'll say it here, that I was honestly blown away by what I found. Just the dedication to the profession and the knowledge. Honestly, I never thought that existed. And so I was really pleasantly surprised going through that whole process. So kudos to everybody on this call. It's an impressive organization, and everyone that I met and speak with, it's been a tremendous time for me. So thank you for all the things that you kind of taught to me. So, and I think I'm in kind of a unique position as far as surveyors go, that I work hand in hand with a GIS person. It doesn't happen in a lot of the cases. You know, some of the larger firms were kind of separate, and the smaller firms, they just don't have it. So I'm in a kind of a unique situation here, and I think I'm better for it. And you know, I thank Rich for what he's brought to the table, and I think we work well together.
Question, Gary, how you mentioned you pretty much got involved 30 years ago in surveying through engineering. Would you say that that's similar nowadays? People might start out knowing about engineering and stumble upon surveying, or what are other avenues people, young people or older, that get involved?
What I've seen, especially in the surveying field, what I've seen is it's through family. That's a lot of it. There's definitely, you enter a position, you know, at say an engineering company, you know, when they have it, then you do learn more, but it's not the easiest thing, because it's not well known surveying out there. So that's why through the TrigStar program and other things that we try to do, we try to bring this to, whether it be the Boy Scouts or, you know, high schools, just to try and, you know, teach them a little bit more about what we do. So it's kind of mixed on how you get into this. I mean, that was just the way I did. So I'll always tell everybody, whatever you go to college for, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to end up in your career as. So.
True. All right, so we'll move on to the next slide here, Gary, if you want to.
Yeah, I just,
start
before
us
I
off.
started all the other stuff about surveying, I thought I'd throw a few fun facts in there. And this is something, if I give a talk to high school students or anybody else who wants to listen about surveying, these are just some things that I just think are interesting and maybe nobody really knows. So as far as the history of surveying goes, they didn't have all that fancy equipment we have today. They didn't even have, you know, steel tapes or cloth tapes. What they initially started with was chains. So anybody who's read through, you know, deeds, possibly older deeds, and they show chains and links, this is what it looked like. So one chain was 66 feet, and every chain had 100 links. So if you're always wondering where that acre came from, 43,560 square feet, where in the world did that? Well, that was all based on chains. So that's 10 square chains. That's where that came from. And the mile is the same thing, 5,280 feet. That's 80 chains. As far as the width and the right-of-ways that you may encounter, and, you know, parcel mapping or whatever you may encounter, one rod was 16.5 feet, and that was one of the things they used to measure right-of-ways. So if you see right-of-ways that are 33 feet or 66 feet, that's where this all originated from, was that original rod that was 16.5. So it's just some, I thought, fun facts. If you want to impress somebody at dinner tonight, you know, maybe you can throw that out at them, but there you go. It's a little fun lesson in the history of surveying.
So when you see, because I've come across these in deeds, like you said, when you see these in deeds, this is something that you can just use a conversion and use it as if it's feet.
Yeah, I mean, that's when I read through a deed, I would always just immediately convert the chains and links to feet. So what I do, if it's one chain, 2 links, it's 1.02 times 66. And then you easily get that conversion to feet, and then you can actually utilize it from there. So.
Awesome. All right. We're going to keep this slide up, but we kind of start off the main portion of the presentation. Gary, I know you touched on it, but can you talk about how exactly somebody becomes a licensed land surveyor, specifically in New Jersey?
Yeah, so New Jersey, as I mentioned before, you need to have a bachelor's degree in surveying from an accredited college. Currently, it's offered in New Jersey at NJIT and Rowan University. That's 2 places that you will be able to get that accredited degree. Then, once you get your bachelor's, you will need to pass 2 sets of exams, fundamentals in surveying and principles and practices in surveying. It's 16 hours of exams. Once you pass that, you'll need 3 years of experience. And that's all then has to be Your application for that goes through the state board that regulates surveying. It's the State Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors, New Jersey. That's where you need to place your application, tell them about all the experience and the bachelor's that you've received, and then you go through that process and ultimately would be able to receive your license.
So before the education requirement, it was everything but that, just experience.
Yeah, they
and a
had
test?
increased, I think it was either 5 to 8 years of experience, but they never had the bachelor's degree. That was around 1992 that changed.
Got it. All right, well, yeah, if you're ready, we can jump into the definition
Yeah,
and
sure.
and go from there. This.
Yeah, I don't like to read slides normally, but I think I'm going to read this one verbatim and just kind of leave it there. But I think it's important just to understand from our administrative code, everything that we do as a licensed land surveyor is basically set up in our code for the state. And every state has their own, but in New Jersey, like here's our definition, 13:40. Land surveying or surveying or practice of land surveying means any service or work, the adequate performance of which involves the application of special knowledge of the principles of mathematics, the related physical and applied sciences, and the relevant requirements of law to the act of measuring and locating distances, directions, elevations, natural and man-made, topographical features in the air, on the surface of the earth, within underground workings, and on beds of bodies of water for the purpose of determining areas and volumes, and for establishing of horizontal vertical control as it relates to construction stakeout, for the monumentation of property boundaries, and for platting and layout of lands and subdivisions thereof, and for preparation and perpetuation of maps, record plats, field notes, records, and property descriptions in manual and computer coded form that represents these surveys. It's quite the mouthful. The practice of land surveying includes the establishment and maintenance of the base mapping and related control for land information systems that are developed from the practice of land surveying. So there you go. It's an all-encompassing description. I just wanted to throw it up there just so you understood what falls under land surveying as it's seen through the statutes of the state of New Jersey. And again, all of this is regulated by the state board, professional engineers and land surveyors. It's meant to protect the public health, welfare, and safety. So whenever I'm asked, does that fall under surveying or whatnot, that's always my take. Is it going to affect the public, and are they protected by the information that's being provided to them? And again, as the state board regulates this information, it's also a means, if there's any complaints or any deficiencies possible, then that complaint can be brought before the state board, and then they would address that with the individual licensee.
You mentioned other states, Gary. Do you have experience with other states, and are there glaring differences in these laws, or at least the definition of surveying between states?
No, they're pretty similar. I'm actually licensed in New York as well. It's very similar. They have the basics of surveying are the same, especially in the colonial states. The public land states out west, there's a whole different setup. So they have a little different regulations and who looks over them, the Board of Land Management. But in New Jersey and the surrounding colonial states, it's fairly the same. They have some individual state differences as far as the mapping and what they call them, what they can do. And also they have some other professionals that can do different things that fall under this category within New Jersey and other states. But all in all, they're very similar.
Got it. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next slide here. And if you want to speak to some of the subchapters specifically within the code here and what the board is actually doing, what are they actually regulating? Is it the surveyor human themselves, or the survey final product itself, the act of it?
They kind of handle all of that. So this is just a rundown of what the state board oversees in Chapter 20 of our administrative code. We've gone through already the definition and the licensure requirements. We just talked about that. The standards of practice, again, there's some guidelines there that the licensee must follow, and that's can be subject to disciplinary action by the state board. So that's it behooves everyone is a licensee or a professional. He needs to know that inside and out so they understand how they need to run their practice and the ethics thereof. And just some general provisions in there. I think what I'd like to talk about a little bit, more would be the standards of the preparation of surveys. Maybe I think we have a slide for that. So this is really my guideline. If I'm giving a proposal to anyone, this is where these are the minimum standards that we comply with. 13:40-5.1 just kind of rolls off all the surveyors' tongues because this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what's kind of included in our practice, what we need to do prior to conducting a survey. And then, how we're supposed to do that survey. That has to be a field survey. And then it goes on to say how our surveys, and once they're completed, how they can be used by other professionals. So just a little bit about what the practice of land surveying includes: the correct determination description for conveyancing. So if you're purchasing a piece of land, excuse me, they would normally require a survey, whether it be a home, whether it be a commercial property, retail, anything. We'll talk later about green acres parcels and those sorts of things. Mark will talk a little bit more about that later. But anytime you're purchasing land, we always recommend getting a survey so you understand what you're getting. And a lot of times the lender will, actually require it because they basically own it until you pay off your mortgage. So we are told that that's what we need to do, the correct determination of that. The establishment and reestablishment of boundary lines, whether we reestablish boundary lines that were created by others through subdivisions, different conveyances, or we can create subdivisions on our own so that we can establish new land boundaries. I talked about preparation of subdivisions, the applications that we put through to the individual municipalities. That has to be done by a surveyor. It has to be based on a current survey. So we would perform the survey first, and then we would submit to the municipal boards, whether it be a minor subdivision or a major subdivision. And then there's some other items in here that it talks about what needs to be included in a survey. One thing they make sure is all the research that is required prior to conducting a survey. This would include deed research, old maps, talking to adjoining owners, old surveys, any information you could have that gives you some historical knowledge of what has gone on with that property over the years. That you're supposed to get it as much as you possibly can so that you can provide your opinion on with the most knowledge in that final survey. Then how are you supposed to complete that survey? Well, it has to be done in the field. We have to do the field work. We use whatever equipment may be necessary for the specific task that's required for that specific survey. And all that work needs to be watched and just made sure everything is done appropriately by the land surveyor. So that goes through that whole process. They have to be in responsible charges, is the word I was looking for. They need to watch what goes on throughout the entire process to make sure that they're okay with it, because at the end of the day, they're going to have to certify to it and sign it.
Gary, going back to the research portion of this, does that mean like when you would work with a title company to do a title report? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so title reports are very important for us. We don't always get them, but we always like to have them. They give us a full idea of the title for the property, at least as far back as they do go. They just, when the title report is done by a title searcher, they search everything at the courthouse and get as much information as they can, whether it be a 60-year search, 80-year search, 100-year search, whatever may be required for the property. And then they'll give any kind of conveyances throughout that time period, any kind of easements that may have come about for benefiting the land or maybe encumbering the land on either side. So all that information is there, and that's all recorded data. So that's extremely important to have so that you can have a more accurate survey.
So I'm sure more people on this call might have had experience with this already, but is that where something like title insurance, when you're purchasing property, how does that all tie into this?
Well, yeah, title insurance obviously is part of it. So the survey is really a piece of that. They insure the title to the property, and then the survey actually helps with that because now they understand if there's any other title issues that may have not come up in the title documents, whether it be an encroachment from an adjoining property or neighbor, whether somebody else is using the driveway and there was never an easement at hand. All those things now come to light when they can physically see the conveyance lines laid on the ground and that made relative to all the existing conditions. So that basically enhances the insurance that you can obtain through a title company. Then they'll mention in their title report all the things that went on, and it's really up to then the purchaser to resolve as many of those encumbrances as they can prior to finalizing that sale. So it's always important. I can't tell you over the years, some go really smooth and some you can't even imagine the amount of encumbrances and people using property that shouldn't be, and they had no idea. Even the current owners had no idea. So it does bring to light a lot of information. So it is important to see. It basically gives you a picture of what you have versus just the title documents that you would find at the courthouse. It gives you a picture of what's physically in the field related to those conveyance lines that are written in those deeds.
So something kind of along those lines that I know many people here have come across. Let's say you're looking at a survey and you might be looking at another document like a filed map. You might see an easement on the filed map but not on the survey, or not even specific to like a personal like home or property, an easement that might appear on some sort of utility document that you don't know if it's been filed, and you don't know if it comes up in a title report. It's kind of a gray area, I think, but how does the law look at this, or in your opinion, how would you approach some of these issues that I know we've all come across?
Yeah, we've definitely come across what appear to be uses by others that may not have been found in a recorded document. So that's something that can be handled at the time of a closing if you're purchasing, or if you just get a survey of your property and you find these things out. We've recently done multiple surveys for larger utility companies, and it's just amazing how many neighboring properties are now encroaching into those areas. And then Mark could probably speak to that later about green acres and parklands and how everybody likes to land grab when nobody's looking. But we've encountered that quite a bit. But it gives the owner then a chance to stop that encumbrance and just notify those who are doing that. Then even if we encounter in the field, the possibility of one, and we're not seeing it in any recorded document, we will ask the title company to go back further, maybe 100 years, maybe 120 years, just to look a little further and see if there may have been. So it takes time, but it's just to have that document helps tremendously, just so you have an understanding of who has rights into your property and who doesn't.
I guess moving along with D through J there, do you want to speak to some of that?
Well, one of the things is property markers. It's something that was always recommended, and in New Jersey now, you would have to set markers unless the purchaser or anybody who's requested the survey waives that. So there is a special stake waiver form. So if you ever do have a closing and you're never presented with that form, but you did have a survey done, then the expectation would be that the markers were set. That's a law that's been in place, for a while now. And every surveyor needs to put that on there, and they need to provide that stake waiver form so that the person who or the client that you're working for understands that if they want the markers, they can. But if they don't want them, then they would have to sign that waiver form. So it tells us that number one, you have to set markers, offers that stake waiver form to sample, but it also tells us what type of marker is acceptable.
And then I guess the rest of this subchapter governs like standard notes and terminology that appear on the physical surveys.
Yeah, it's just the ins and outs on how you can do the survey, when you need to write a written description, when that has to be included in the survey. You would have to provide a written description for a conveyance. So if a piece of land was going to go from one person to another, then it's mandatory that we provide a written description to go along with that, and that would have to be signed and sealed as well.
Okay. Long.
So I just so one thing I did want to talk about was boundary, that word boundary, and what a boundary survey entails. So this is the definition that I kind of put together. Boundary surveys typically used in conveyances and will include land being purchased along with any physical features that may exist in and around the property. And so I wanted to stress this, and I wanted to talk about it because I had one occurrence it's probably last year. I'm a state director for our state surveying society. So I was at a directors meeting and we had a huge discussion because we were just notified that the GIS community had, the geospatial community, whoever it was, had just put together a boundary line between Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And that's the wording that was used. And it just, the hair on every surveyor's back just like kind of stood up and just like, all right, how did they do that? What do they mean? But so I have this slide in here because I just wanted to stress, how we use words, and I know how the geospatial community throws words around. I spent, probably 15 minutes in that meeting just calming everybody down and just saying, when they say boundary, they don't mean what we do. It means two different things. To set a boundary line, honestly, we can show them on surveys, but the court is really the only one in the state of New Jersey that can actually define a boundary and confirm it. We give our opinions, but if there's any discrepancy or dispute, the court of law is the only way you're going to get that fixed. So they're really the only ones that can set the boundary. And so it's instances like that. When I hear the word boundary thrown around, I just kind of wanted to include this slide in here. And, when I maybe describe a boundary survey to someone, which is, probably one of the most typical things we're asked to do as surveyors, is that words matter. And even on a boundary survey, I just listed a couple way to describe lines here, and they all mean something different. And I kind of stole this from a recent seminar that I went to. I thought it was very interesting, and I thought it would be helpful today just to show that words do matter and how you say things. So a deed line to me is based on words in a conveyance. So if I'm researching something in the courthouse and it gives me bearings and distances, chains and lengths, whatever it may be, that those to me are deed lines. Ownership lines may be different. I may pull an adjoining deed, which is something we do. We don't just isolate the one parcel that we're working on. We make sure we check all the ones surrounding to make sure there's no differences. And we may see that the adjoining deed has a different line or a different description or a different angle going off the front street line. So now we have a discrepancy. We have deed lines. Now we have disputed ownership lines, possibly. And then we go and do our field work, and we find that we have something different, possibly. Occupation lines. We have a fence that runs in an area that we didn't anticipate. We have driveways that cross between. We have restaurants that have an entire wing built on somebody else's property. It's just, there's so many things. We've had a huge horse corral that was probably 100 feet over the line. It's just, when you get out into the field, who knows what you're going to find. So then we call them occupation lines. And then when we talk about property lines, to me, it's the property lines would be between two separate parcels, like between me and my neighbor. And then a boundary line is kind of encompassing property lines, but also would represent a line between the parcel and the right of way, or, the roadway that's, in front of our home. So these are just things that we encounter. These are things that we would spell out on our boundary survey. We would show everything. We would give our opinion as to where this is, and that's based on all the rules of evidence and everything else that we follow to create a survey of this nature. And then we would show the differences. There's gap scores, those sorts of things. So there's just a lot that goes into it. And there's a lot of different things that you encounter, and then they may require a lot of additional research just to get to the bottom of it or try and get an understanding. Or it may end up that you have a dispute that you can't fix, and then there's different ways that you can go ahead and try and rectify that. But
Trish, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know there are some notes in the chat. I don't know if you guys address those now, or if you want to continue. Might be relevant to address now, or we could cover them at the end.
Sure, I'm
I guess
looking.
the one.
yeah, your sound is going in and out, Trish, but I think
it's the
we'll
one
just
from
get
the
through
letter.
one or
Gary,
two more things.
It's-
And yeah, we'll
Gary,
get
can
one.
I just jump in while you're on this slide? It's Andy. What word would have made the surveyors more comfortable when we were talking about the state boundary?
Well, we've created a new line that would establish that the line between the two. It's tough, It's just, again, I don't want a misunderstanding. It's one of the things why I wanted to have this talk, with the geospatial community, just to say that, this is what it means to us. And sometimes it may require an explanation when you're, talking about a specific line or a line that was created, or we now have a line that we can show on a map. It's just, yeah, it's a good question, Brian or Andy. I'm not sure who chimed in, but
Andy.
Yeah, Andy. So it's, yeah, I don't know if I can give a definite description, Andy. I apologize for
Okay.
that, but it's just when
Well, I
it's
like your
this,
answer
yeah.
that we just meant something different from you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just think that just has to be part of that. It's just, again, how important metadata is, right? It's just let us know what it is, and then, we'd be fine.
Yeah.
And Trish, I'm sorry, you said there were questions coming through.
But they're in the chat. You see it? Just.
Yeah,
seeing a
you
lot
know
of-
what? That was the main one. That was the main question that seemed relevant.
Okay.
So you guys can go on and what I can
Okay.
do is I can look at the chat.
Yeah, because I'm seeing a lot of the congratulations. I'm not seeing a lot of the questions, I guess. But it's okay. We'll definitely get to those at the end. Unless something else timely like that pops up, please let me know. So Gary, I guess you mentioned easements. Is that somebody owns an easement? Would an easement line be an ownership line in this situation? based on these terms that we have here?
Well, easement line,
Technically.
it could be, well, it's really a separate line. These all pertain to the actual boundary of a property, but easement line would
Okay.
be something within itself. It has a different meaning. An easement is an encumbrance. It's rights somebody has in somebody else's land that they owned, is basically what it is for a specific use. So the easement document would state what that use is, and then your rights are limited to that use. So whether it be a driveway easement, a utility easement, any kind of other type of specific use that would be mentioned in the easement. And then again, your rights in that land would be just specific to that and limited to that.
And then just so we're not excluding anyone, conveyance, when you use that word, you mean?
It's the purchase of a piece of property. Basically, you're transferring your rights to somebody else for a set fee.
We go back to some of the standards that we were looking at before to continue. Gary, if you want to continue on.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little in depth about boundary survey. I just kind of wanted to throw that in there because that was really the most popular one that everybody on the call would probably recognize. Other things that we're responsible for in New Jersey, tax assessment maps for all the municipalities, any types of subdivisions. I talked about a little bit of that prior. Other types of surveys that we would be able to do are bathymetric. Basically, it's a topographic survey at the bottom of a water body. Hydrographic surveying, that kind of includes bathymetric, but also includes shoreline and some tidal data. We could show that. Planimetric survey, to me, is existing physical features. And then topographic survey would then show the elevations, contours, and provide a service for a specific, parcel of land. So a boundary survey, we could include the existing conditions relative to the boundary lines. We could also show topographic data if it's maybe used for a development or for a site plan or for whatever else the client may need. And then also just setting any kind of flood elevations that's on a site, whether it be data from FEMA or whatnot. Elevation certificates in New Jersey are required to be prepared by professional land surveyors.
And I guess one thing I thought of, let's say you're performing a bathymetric survey, how exactly does that get performed if the water feature like a lake or a pond is filled?
Typically they use sonar is how they do it, sound waves. They get the contours of the bottom. I know I haven't had any experience with it, but I know there's a LiDAR that they're using. How that works underwater, I'm not really sure. And what that looks like. So I can't speak to that, but any project that we've ever had that we've had bathymetric, it's been via sonar, and they set themselves up with GPS units that track where they are. So the data they're collecting below ground is now relative to the coordinates of the site.
And I know we've had situations where like a man-made lake might have been drained for a survey to be performed.
Right.
Is that technically a bathymetric survey, or are field surveyors still on ground there at the bottom?
That's a good question.
Curveball.
But yeah, thanks a lot for that. But yeah, we've actually recently done that for a site in Bergen County where they've drained the swimming pond. We've actually did a laser scan of the bottom of that. And we needed to do that because they were adding some play features within that lake, the swimming lake. So we actually used the scan of the bottom, which I guess technically would be a bathymetric survey. Knowing what the water elevation would be, we needed to provide depths and where that equipment would fit, within the constraints of that swimming pond.
And then as far as a hydrographic survey, you mentioned tidal is what's usually asked for in these situations: a low tide point, a high tide point.
So the tidal is its own, basically the tidal elevations are their own being. And what we're normally asked to show there is a mean high water. that's something that we would come up with, and we would use the tide gates and whatnot that's available to determine that in a specific area. And that's usually where there's a differential between a riparian and upland. The mean high water is typically that guideline or that boundary line there that would be mentioned in the deed. So that's what we would try and establish in the field, and that's what we would show in our survey.
And I think part of these standards it mentioned, like if these standards aren't met, the board steps in and can get involved with penalties of some sort. Is it usually a client or the homeowner sees something and complains to the board, or is this something another surveyor might see years and years down the line and say, oh, this was done incorrectly, I have to report the surveyor who did the survey years ago?
That's a good question. The surveyor is actually responsible to watch their own. As you could say, that's part of our regulations that we're supposed to, if we see something, we're supposed to say something. That's part of what we're supposed to do. If we see another professional or another licensee that's not meeting the standards, then we can go before the board and submit a complaint. Or whether it be a client who feels like they didn't receive what they were told that they should have. There's been several instances, in that case. So then they can go to the state board. They have an avenue now to go, whether they don't have to go to court. They basically now can go to the state board who regulates this licensee. They would go through the hearings and disciplinary action, whether it be a fine, it could be all the way up to removing someone's license if it's that egregious. I could lose my license and never be able to practice again. So it happens. So my livelihood would be gone. So we have to adhere to these standards. The standards are there for that reason. If you don't, then that's, when there's a chance you could be removed from, your license could be removed and you wouldn't be able to practice again. So it's just protecting, again, the public, making sure they're getting what they expect from a licensee and a professional. And when they don't, they have an avenue to deal with that. And the state board will handle that.
Great. One last thing on this slide I want to touch on is from the topographic survey perspective, something I learned when somebody in the field is going out and collecting this data, they're collecting a lot of points, and through whatever mechanisms of that data collection, they're able to create lines out in the field that is then understood by the office staff who's drafting this work. So any elevation changes that the field workers out there, plotting out in the field, comes into the office, and eventually contours are created and a surface is created, which I originally didn't connect the dots here, but a surface then kind of extrapolates all these points and makes like a live view, and you can essentially click, if you're in the software, on any point, even in between some of these points of elevation that were taken, and get an approximate or a calculated elevation based on that. And that's something that we've seen also on the GIS TINs or DEMs. So
Correct.
It's kind of a different way of going about it. I was able to see the creation of these. I've only ever maybe ingested these from USGS mapping. So it's these kinds of moments where you realize we're kind of doing similar work here. We're taking in similar data and then using it for whatever purpose we need.
That's correct. Yeah. Those break lines, we call them, we identify those in the field and would actually locate them. So any extrapolation that you do between the points we located in the field, because we have the break lines on either side of that, they should be an adequate elevation that you would find in the field. So that's why we like to do on-ground surveying for any design work. So no matter where the design comes in on any specific site, they know they have an accurate elevation to adhere to for design purposes.
Oh, let's move on to this slide here, Gary, and then after this, we'll get Mark and John involved. I know they might be getting antsy.
Yeah, and just a few more things. I mean, we hit on a lot of these topics. So division of responsibility, that chapter 7, that just talks about who can prepare site plans, who can prepare major and minor subdivisions. So that's in there. What type of, chapter 8 is what type of documents we have to seal, what needs to be on our title blocks. 9 talks about responsible charge. Again, what I said before, that all projects have to be overseen by a land surveyor. And that's something, if you ever ask for a survey or have a survey performed, you have to make sure that, that is the case. If you have a larger company with different licensees, you're required to get a certificate of authorization, which, we have here in our office. And then continuing competency, our license is renewed every 2 years. And then we need to have 24 continuing education units within those 2 years. So I was just at the conference this past week, so I earned some there, and then I'll go next year and we'll earn some additional. You can get those at the conference, but also there's lots available online. So yeah, that's pretty much covers the rest of that. And this, yeah, we can move on. So if there are additional standards, other than the minimum standards that the state requires, something we deal with quite a bit is the ALTA NSPS Land Title Survey. It's the American Land Title Association and the National Society of Professional Surveyors. They got together probably in the late 60s, I think it was. They knew there was a need as the world kind of got, the country kind of got smaller. They knew there was a need to standardize, have a national standard for surveys. What was happening is a commercial property was being purchased in New Jersey. The title company was in Chicago and the lender was in California. And their definition of what a survey was all different. So what they decided, they would get together and then come up with a national standard and requirements for an ALTA survey. And that's what they've revised that over the years. We're on 2021 now, I believe, is the latest revision. But that's for larger commercial properties. We don't see this for small residential, but for any larger sites or where there's a lot of money involved, these are typically requested, this type of survey. And that comes along with a lot of optional survey options with that. It's kind of a menu of what do you want or what don't you want. And a lot of times that's chosen by the lender. They are putting a whole lot of money into this, so they want to make sure that they're covered and have all the information they need before they write that check. And then some of the other state requirements, which, this will lead into speaking with Mark and John. The DEP Green Acres has their own additional standards and requirements to perform their surveys. So, maybe Rich, if you want to just introduce, have them introduce, and then they can talk a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So we have Mark Ashton, land surveyor, and John Thomas from GIS from Green Acres. Mark, if you want to start and give a quick introduction about yourself.
All right, thanks. Yeah, my name is Mark Ashton. I'm a professional land surveyor with the Green Acres. I'm with the Green Acres department at the DEP. I've been with them almost 10 years now. Prior to that, I worked in the private sector for 25 or 30 years.
Great.
I always say, I worked in the private sector and we were building subdivisions and strip malls and warehouses, cutting down all kinds of trees and stripping the lands. And now I'm preserving land and sort of like I'm doing my penance. So.
And thanks, Mark. And John, if you want to give a quick introduction of yourself.
Sure. Thank you. John Thomas, yes, with the Green Acres program. We are responsible for keeping track or inventorying the open space that the state purchases. Green Acres, as you may know, is basically the real estate agent for parks, fish and wildlife, natural lands, and then we also fund acquisitions for counties, municipalities, and nonprofits.
Great. So Mark, if you want to, I guess, continue on and kind of address some of those increased requirements at Green Acres and maybe go into a little bit more detail of what you do survey-wise for Green Acres.
Okay. Green Acres does have additional standards above and beyond the New Jersey Administrative Code. We actually have a 60-page document with the requirements for Green Acres surveys. Some of it, really, that document's it's a conglomeration of the Administrative Code. We included some of the alter requirements, and we included some of the extra requirements required by Green Acres. Part of the reason why Green Acres has extra requirements is because in most cases, the properties that are being surveyed and acquired by the state is going to be the last survey and description that's prepared for that property, in most cases. So for that reason, it needs to be accurate, it needs to stand up to the test of time. And we have additional requirements along those lines. Another reason is where there's a managing entity, whether it's Parks and Forestry or Fish and Wildlife or our stewardship people, they refer to these surveys when they're out in the fields trying to figure out where their boundaries are. And those folks are not surveyors. So we try to include data on there that makes it easier for them to figure out where they're at on a property and being able to monitor and keep track of where the boundaries are and looking for encroachments and that type of thing.
That's great. And I guess if you, or even John, if you want to speak a little bit to how you work with Mark and
Sure. I could just add to that with, the GIS is the mechanism that we can organize all of our properties and then keep track of those ones that we have the survey data for. So it, as Mark said, it helps those agencies with posting boundaries and just seeing, their facilities as a whole, where we have, survey data, or we've used other deeds or parcel data for property that we didn't acquire a survey for. So it's the mechanism that kind of brings it all together for us, that, using GIS.
And I'm actually going to stop sharing screen here for now, just so we have more of a conversation here. But so if Mark, if you want to talk a little bit how you work with John and what process of you receiving a survey and kind of how that goes down the chain.
I'm one of the surveyors that works very closely with our GIS department. I review surveys for any properties that Green Acres acquires in fee. I also review all the surveys that Green Acres has any funding for. A lot of times properties acquired by a local municipality or a county or a nonprofit, but if they're getting Green Acres funding or reimbursement, I review that survey also. When I approve all these surveys, part of the deliverables is AutoCAD files, which I look at, and then I send them over to John Thomas so that he can add the boundaries into his GIS system over there. Another thing that we do quite frequently is if one of the managing entities goes out in the fields and they think that there's somebody encroaching on a property, they'll ask us to look into that and see what we can find out exactly where their boundary line is, or approximately. In some cases, we have prior surveys of the property that we own. In a number of cases, we don't have surveys. That would be properties that were acquired prior to the Green Acres program, 1961. In those instances, what we'll do is we'll either look for a deed for the property in question that we own, or we'll look for adjoining deeds, and I'll plot them up in AutoCAD and sort of Ouija them into the aerial photography in the GIS department. I can set up a lot of the properties based on, sometimes the deeds run along the center line of the roads, or if it's a right of way and I know 25 feet from the right of way is the center line of the road, I can line it up with the road approximately and get close to where the boundary is. It's not exactly, but in a lot of these cases, the encroachments we're talking about are, 30, 40, 50 feet encroachments, and I can Ouija it in close enough to say I'm within a foot or two probably, and that yes, there is an encroachment, or no, there is not an encroachment. John and I work very closely with those folks to review that information.
And John, anything else you want to add to that process, I guess?
Yeah, Mark seemed to cover it all. It's, you know, I'm in a very fortunate position where I have a surveyor that can review any questions that I have on data that we've put in before. A lot of the surveys that we purchased properties in the 60s and 70s, we have those paper maps. Some of them have been entered in to the GIS, some haven't. Some have coordinates, some don't. Some fit together, some don't. So it's great to have Mark to bounce that information. His expertise can, you know, it comes in very handy when I'm trying to figure that out. So it's a great relationship that we able to work together and figure those issues out.
I
That's
saw
good.
I saw in the chat earlier somebody was mentioning about is it possible to have a standard for requiring surveys to be in state plane coordinate systems? All Green Acres surveys are required to be in a state plane coordinate system. And in answer to that question, I would like to see that standard because just about every firm out there now has GPS capability, and it would only take, you know, a matter of minutes to establish state plane coordinates on a property. That would eliminate a lot of confusion all the way around for everybody.
Well, maybe I'll just chime in there too, and I just noticed that too. I think Tom Thorson had asked that question, and we in our office we put all our surveys in state plane. That's how we operate. It like Mark said, it's simple to do. We have the equipment to do it. Then it allows our engineers, which a majority of the survey data that we put together is utilized by our engineers, and now that allows them to use any of the online available resources that, you know, FEMA or the DEP or DOT may have, whether it be wetland locations, soil maps, tidelands. All that data is already input and georeferenced. So to be able to overlay that, you get a tremendous amount of information immediately if you put your survey, or we provide our survey in that same system. It just brings everything together very nicely.
One thing that I can add to that, it's helpful when we acquire large tracts of land and those agencies are trying to post the properties and there's not a lot of reference point in the field. You know, they're able to, or I can create points along that line or let them know from the survey that, you know, they're corner set and they can locate those with some type of GPS unit downloading that CAD file and should get them and save time in the field locating those locations and posting the boundaries.
Right, and one of the survey requirements is right on the survey plan. We require a table of coordinates for the corners of a property, so that somebody who's a non-surveyor and doesn't have CAD capability can load those coordinates into, you know, like a handheld GPS and get themselves close to where the boundary is to be able to monitor it.
Mm-hmm. We kind of use that same, right, Rich, in our office. We do a lot of mark out for one of the utility companies, authorities that we work with. We have all their utilities located in a GIS system. You know, we've gone through, I don't know how many manholes it was, 3,000 or something. But we, you know, we have that all in a database, and whenever we're requested to do markouts, just because you can't see between manholes in the field, or because there's bends in the lines, or because there were force mains, we have all that data there. Then the GIS system is great because now we can click on, I can get attribute data, I can get the contract drawings that were the basis for this, when the field work was done, so much information. And that's why I love the GIS part of it. It just can add so much to the base data that we provided, you know, for that system, put that data together, that system together. And then we can utilize that daily, whether Rich produces that data or our survey department does. It can come from both directions. So yeah, we kind of use it in that same manner. It really works out well.
And that kind of answers a good question that came in interested how your company might distinguish your products since you have a GIS team and a surveying team. Does it ever cause confusion? Like Gary just mentioned, if there's data that is being collected or utilized, if that's the data that we're all happy with here in our office, that's the data that we're using. We'll always know where this data is coming from in our case, but it hasn't caused confusion for us, as far as I know, because the data that maybe has been collected by some of the non-survey staff that has been certified and we're happy with it, that kind of fits in with some of the survey data that's included in this exact utilities example. So we're in our ways, we're able to mention where this data is coming from. And for our purposes, it has not caused any confusion.
No, we work so closely hand in hand that we know what each other's doing and we know what the client expectations are. So we determine how we're going to be collecting that data in the field, what it can be used for. We're very aware of all those instances. So there isn't a matter of confusion there. Because a lot of times we locate it the best way we possibly can, so that we can use it in the future for other matters or for more design work. So we kind of go the extra mile in a lot of cases just to make sure that we can use it for not just this one purpose, but for any anticipated purpose in the future. So that's the conversation that Rich and I always have. Yeah, they asked for that, but we could possibly use it for this. So why don't we just do a little extra and make sure that we can? So that's kind of how we operate.
And then I guess going back to and moving along with some of the discussion about having a survey for a property and adjoining surveys, John and Mark, I guess all of us, when we can kind of talk about parcels and tax maps. I know now with digital tax maps, GIS and survey is more involved than ever. I don't know if you touched too much on tax maps, Gary, the requirements involved from a surveying perspective.
You want to talk through that?
Go
Tax
for it.
maps?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so we do that here in our office, and like we said before, that was one of the requirements for the surveyor is to put the tax assessment maps together. So we all know the tax assessment maps are for the assessment of taxes, but they do have requirements that all those maps get put together or prepared with aerial mapping, survey grade data in the field. And that's kind of how we operate. We would put maps together. We would do the necessary field work. We have aerial imagery that we've georeferenced. We've located points in the field to do that. So now we have a good base map. Then we would pull the deeds. We would pull the file maps. We would reach out to DOT for their mapping. We would reach out to Tidelands for their information. We would reach out to, where else do we get? Railroad. That's the other big one. And then we would put all that data together, best fit onto the georeferenced mapping that we have, and to the best way we can. And as I kind of talked before, there's so many chances of that the deeds don't function or they don't close, or there's issues with that, or they're so ambiguous that you can't make heads or tails out of the description. So those types of things, we don't have to resolve them for a tax map. I mean, we have to do kind of a best fit. So that's why we don't, even our regulations state that tax maps can't be used to establish boundaries or be used or should not be used in descriptions, which just going to flat out say too many surveyors do, because they change over time anyway, and it's not something that can be held up in court. You can't use tax maps for boundaries. That's not the intent. It's for the assessment. But now that they're georeferenced and you put the parcel in the best way you can, again, you can take that data and overlay it onto all the online available data. And another thing that we encounter a lot is through the municipalities, any application requires a 200-foot property owners list. And a lot of the municipalities provide that, and they certify to that. And if those parcels are not correct, it could mean make a huge difference if somebody's, opposing a development and they don't notice properly, they could completely crash the whole process. Just because those parcels were not done, and we've encountered that, so I know that's a thing. And even in law enforcement, they use it for 1,000-foot or 500-foot from publicly owned properties. Just so when arrests are made, they want to know where they are in relationship to that park or to that library or to that school. They want to know where they are, and that could mean a big difference to the person that was arrested, and whether it be fines or jail time. It's a huge. So again, it's something. A lot of those cases, if it does go to court, they would have to be certified by a surveyor anyway. But just leading into it, those parcels are not just used for assessment, but they are used for some other matters. So to get them in the best that we possibly can, that's always is what they require, and it's the best scenario for the use of those maps.
Trish, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just hoping you guys can address Chris McLean's question there. Can you see that one? Can the surveyors address?
Would you be able to read it, Trish? I'm so sorry. I'm seeing up to
Yeah.
11:15.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. It says, can the surveyors address the causes for pincushion corners? Which I'm not familiar with. I don't know what that means. So
I could show you a real picture of it. Yeah, I have a picture actually. If I could move my camera over, I'll show you. There's so the pincushion effect is it's very unfortunate, to be perfectly honest. So when surveyors go in the field, one of the things that they look for is property corner evidence, whether it be a monument, whether it be a pin or an axle, a pin and cap. It could be any number of things. And what they do with that, they follow the laws of evidence and on all the other matters that go into actually providing an opinion on a survey. They'll put that together, and then what they'll do is go ahead and set their own corner. So I actually, the picture I have in here is a concrete monument that was set as the original survey, which should have been held by everyone. And I had 3 other surveyors actually drill a hole in there, put their own mark in there, and move it over by a tenth or two. So it's very unfortunate. And in New Jersey and especially the Northeast, land is so precious, right? It's so expensive. Everybody wants to claim every square inch. And if you remember from the fun fact in the beginning with the chains and links, that's how it started. So the problem is everybody started with chains and links. Now we're using instruments that I can get to the millimeter, to the 100th of an inch without a problem. And we're trying to now reassess all that. It's not our job as survey. Our job as surveyors are to reestablish or follow the footsteps of the prior surveyor. That's what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to, make it our own and just say, no, everybody else before us didn't know what they were doing. Now I know. And there's a lot of rules and whatnot that goes into that. So it's unfortunate that happens. And honestly, it shouldn't. And believe me, if you see a lot of the surveying publications, you'll see the same pictures and the same, well, how does this happen? Why does it happen? And why do we continually see this? It's because they may not, they're not following what they need to as far as setting the information up. It's out there. It's unfortunate. We show it. But it should really never be.
Mark, I don't know if you had anything to add, but similar experiences.
Yeah, the pincushion effect certainly is out there. And as Gary mentioned, our directive is to follow in the footsteps of the surveyor before us. At Green Acres, our statute or our rule is that any marker that is found within a 1.5 foot radius of the true corner, that corner is considered marked. What we do require is on a survey showing the location of that, whatever marker it may be, a cap pin or a monument, in relation to the calculated true corner. You know, maybe 0.2 north and 2,500 east or something like that. We require that to be shown on a survey so that we know where the relationship of the true corner is to the marker that exists out there. I did also see, and I'm going to mention because I saw it in the chat here. Somebody's asking, should a map be required to be attached to description? That's also another requirement of Green Acres. Every description that's filed for a Green Acres survey has to have a reduced copy of the survey attached. The reason being is that way somebody who's following up at that deed, 20 years down the road, can know that a survey exists and can inquire to try to get a full-size copy of that survey from us. Along those lines, I'll mention that we have, John, what do you think? 10,000 hard copies of maps here that we're in the process of scanning. It's a slow process, but what we're doing is anytime somebody calls me up or sends me an email requesting a copy of a prior survey, if it's not already scanned, I'll scan it, forward it to the surveyor, but I also forward it to John Thomas in a GIS, and he attaches it to the open space database so that in the future, we can just click on that property in the GIS and it'll give us a link right to the survey instantaneously. So we're in the process of doing that. It's another thing where John and I work closely together, but it's a slow process. But 9,226 more surveys to go.
Yes, I think, excuse me, 2012 was the first time we were requesting digital copies of the survey. So it's ever since then we are getting a PDF of that, which saves us the scanning that comes in part of the deliverables from the surveyor. We are trying to go back in time and get our hands on everything we can that we've acquired, at least on the state side and with the counties and municipalities for properties that we fund. So it is a slow process, but it right now we're using it in-house and it's saving us a lot of time.
All right, maybe I'll just, I see a bunch of questions here in the chat, so I'm just going to address a few, just kind of wrap this up. Bert Simpson asked, what happens if there's a tree, large rock, or other obstruction where markers should be able to be placed? Well, there's several options for us to set markers, whether so we could set an X cut in a rock. We could, that's acceptable. We could drill a point in there and put a washer with our name on it. That's acceptable. We would either then show that or a tree or mark the tree or show an offset along one of the lines. We would do like a 5-foot offset and show that it's a long line. So there's different options we can do in that case. I hope that answers that question. I see Andy had another question about what we would call town, county, and state lines. That's what I call them: town, county, and state lines.
There were some good answers in there from Chris and Steve Eckert.
Yeah,
An administrative boundary or a representation of the legal boundary. A word in front of boundary, I think, would satisfy most surveyors. But I'm glad you were able to explain to that group the differences there.
Sure.
One more item. We kind of mentioned state plane coordinate system. I know in talking of parcels and tax maps, we've brought up the term grid to ground. I don't know if there's like just a high level what that means, because I know, Mark, if you wanted to touch on this, and Gary, just because it's nice to kind of get an understanding of the differences and why things are in a coordinate system. It's kind of going back to our cartography 101 days, but it's good to hear about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I know Mark and John had talked about it, in our prior discussions prior to the presentation. So the state plane, the coordinates that you're getting for state plane are on a flat map.
First goes to,
and
yeah,
so
they're doing the Q&A right now. The guy to the DEP just mentioned that.
Somebody's needs to be on mute. Thank you. So anyway, so the state plane information is on a flat map, a flat surface, basically. When we do tax maps and those sorts of things, when all the municipalities have to match, we leave everything in state plane. So therefore, from the top northern part of New Jersey to the bottom tip of New Jersey, if we keep it in state plane, then we're going to be able to match at all the adjoining lines. One of the instances that we encounter for, like with the DOT with highway mapping, they have coordinates on there as well. But then the stationing that runs, say if you follow stationing for the Turnpike or the Parkway all the way up the state, they have back and ahead stationing because you can't keep up with the coordinates because you're on the ground now. It measures different than on a flat surface. So you would do that conversion from grid to ground. If I'm doing a local survey, I convert it to grid or to ground coordinates. Sorry, from the flat map to the round earth that we have to the actual ground. I'll convert them. Because if I'm laying out a project or I'm laying out the property lines and I send my crew out there, those are the coordinates that they need. They need the physical location. They need to know where that building is related to the boundary line. They need to know where that physically is. They don't need to know it on a flat surface. They need to know it on the ground. And we've encountered that where those conversions weren't made. They went to lay it out and it was completely off. Because they didn't do that conversion. And when they associated that to the ground, nobody took that into account. And all of a sudden the building doesn't fit. So you have to pay attention to that, when you're doing that. And when you receive coordinates, if somebody gives you a set of coordinates, you have to understand what they are. Are they in state plane? Have they been converted? Oftentimes, if we do change it to grid and we think we have to submit it, then we'll give that conversion factor and our centroid that we use to create that. So there is a mechanism to go back and forth, but yeah, there is a definite difference between them, the grid and the ground.
I know, Chris, you have your hand up. You want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the second part of my question about if we could get some input from the surveyors and the GIS side as well about the practical implications of the upcoming new datums coming out from the NGS and how it's going to affect us and what we should be thinking about now.
Yeah, so the new datums are definitely going to be different than what we've seen in the past. We're going to have to track a lot more information. So all the prior datums, I won't go into it crazy today because it would take a lot of time, and I'm really not the true expert in this area. But I just know all the past datums have been based on passive monuments. So monuments that can physically be gone back to remeasured, and that's where they recalibrate everything to. Like the current NAD 83, there's a monument in Meads Ranch in Kansas in the center of the US. That's what everything is based on and realigned. Now it's going to be active. There's not going to be any of these permanent markers. So it's constantly changing. It's all via the satellite and other mechanisms. So the time that data is collected in the field is going to be critical to know because as things change, that you're going to want to know. And if you want to convert between the same datum or prior datums, you're going to need to know the timing of when the data was collected. So to me, that's one of the biggest things we're all going to have to recognize. When we collect data, we have to know when it was collected so that when we try and do that conversion, we'll be able to provide that data and get an accurate conversion from one datum to another or within the same datum. Hope that helps, Chris. There's way more to it, and there's people a lot smarter than me that could probably explain it a little better. But to me, that's the one critical item that I'm going to make sure that we all track in this office is the timing of everything that we do.
And it might be helpful maybe for a future talk to maybe really dive into these things. Chris, I think you make a good point for like practical applications that will actually be affected with ahead of time. We should know what to look out for specific applications. So that might be a good topic for a future meeting, I think.
Yeah, I know we've done some more,
Mhm.
I guess, more academic presentations on it, and it gets pretty down into it. But yeah, I think something along the lines like the practical implications of like things we really need to be thinking about and and addressing would be really helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you.
If we wanted to put in another question here, see, do limitations exist with high accuracy GPS capture compared to traditional survey equipment and methods? When should one be used instead of the other? We didn't really talk too much about technology and specific methods. I think we could do there's a whole interpretation that we can talk about there, and I think I would like to definitely hear from some more experts there. I don't know if Gary, you want to speak more to this about when we do work for designing buildings and structures compared to getting inventories and getting elevations based into a half a foot as opposed to a centimeter or something. For us, I think we usually look at what's the application of this information and where's it being used.
Right.
I don't know, Gary, if you want to add to that.
Well, yeah, that's a big part of it. The elevations would be my concern. The GPS elevations are not. I can do much better on ground with traditional total stations to get the vertical information. So again, it all depends on the tree coverage of the site, the conditions of the site, the buildings. I worry about multipath and, the tree coverage and what effect that may have on the receipt of data through just a strictly GPS unit. We use it a lot for a lot of the work we do. But again, it's just one of the tools in our toolbox. And then we assess the needs for that specific project, knowing the site conditions. And that's how, whether we make that determination in the office or the field crew makes that determination, they have all the equipment with them. Whatever best fits our need for the final deliverable for the project, they'll know what they can utilize and where in the field. So it's a kind of a case-by-case basis is how we address that. But again, all tools, I couldn't use a total station to locate 3,000 manholes, within northern New Jersey. It's just not possible. So again, there's a tool for everything, and we always try to use the best tool for whatever project we're working on.
What was that example, Gary? In what situation would somebody in the field crew or on the survey side, kind of based on the satellites, want to revisit a location, different points of the day? Can you explain that?
As far as vertical goes and GPS, there are some limitations there, and we always like to double check. So our procedure here in our office is if I have to establish a critical elevation and horizontal on each specific site, I will take a minimum of control in the morning and wait 4 hours for the satellite geometry to change, and then do it again. And then I would average the data. You're not going to get the same data depending on where the satellites are in the sky. And then we like to make sure it completely changes. It takes about 4 hours to get different geometry of the satellites in the sky, and then we get a different answer. It could only be, an inch, half an inch, tenth, however you want to speak to it. But if there's a critical matter and if we're setting up a control network, we'll do that for all. We just did a dam survey and we had to take 60 shots at multiple times during the day. It's just to make sure that statistically we can get the information that they're looking for and that they can be confident in. So that's just an instance, of something that we do every day. If we're determining FEMA elevation in the field, we would check existing monumentation if we could versus the GPS. We would do that comparison, and we would do it multiple times in a day just to make sure that we're aligned with the current datum and the data that we have is accurate.
I know we're getting towards the end here. I guess one last question for John, actually, from Patty. John, will the data set with the PDF file be shared publicly at some point? I think that was referring to like Green Acres surveys. Is that something that stays inside the office, or can those be shared publicly?
Right now it's internal, but yes, we do have plans to make that public. Just we don't have a date yet, but yes, it's something that everyone would benefit from. It's public information, and I just don't have a date. But yes, we'd like to share that in the near future.
Got it. And I'm just seeing you answered in the chat as well.
Okay.
Apologize. I think the last question I'm seeing here: how often are monuments resurveyed for the on ground now that they're still are checked into? How does that work?
GPS, is that what I'm understanding that to be?
The question came in from Rich Cipoletti. How often are monuments resurveyed?
Well, as far as if it's the GPS related NGS, they've on the data sheets, it'll tell you when the last time they were resurveyed. I know they went through that for this new datum to prepare ourselves for that. But once this new datum hits, I don't think they're ever going to be resurveyed. They're not going to be relying on those any longer.
Okay.
So they would always have to be checked. I just heard there was an entire subdivision in another state that was actually constructed, and the surveyor had used one of the existing monuments for an elevation. They carried that elevation to the subdivision. He certified that every single one of the homes was out of the flood zone. About a year or two later, after everybody moved in and nobody had flood insurance, every single house flooded. They were under about 3 to 4 feet of water. And the surveyor wanted to sue NGS because he's like, I used your monument. But the problem was he only used one monument, which is, never, as far as our checks and balances goes, we never use one. We try to use a minimum of two just to do the comparison. And so he used the one monument, but what happened is that monument there was subsidence, and the entire area, not just the monument, but everything around it sunk by 3 feet over the last 20 years when that monument was last checked. So he didn't kind of do his due diligence, but again, the monuments are out there, and that's one of the reasons why they're going to this active rather than passive, because when it's on Earth, it changes. They're subject to changes as much as as far as they go to pouring all that concrete and making sure those things don't move. There is a chance that they do. So it's just a horror story with the existing monuments, but technology has really kind of taken over the survey profession, and there's just a lot of different ways we do things, and we're going to have to revisit a lot of it, ourselves as a profession to make sure we are using all this new technology, to our benefit, and that we do it in a manner that fits all the regulations and standards that are required of us as licensees in the state of New Jersey.
So I think we've reached the end here. Thank you, Gary, Mark, and John, for your thoughts. If you have any final thoughts, feel free. But I think thank you all for listening, and I hope we have more. We kind of touched on a little bit of everything, but we could have future conversations about specific aspects. I know there's plenty more questions to be asked.
If there is, you can contact Rich or I. We're always willing, to speak. Email. It should all be in our
to put it in the
profile.
Chat. Yep.
You're gonna put it in the chat. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, feel free to reach out to us. We're always there to answer questions. I love talking surveying. I could do it all day. So any questions, I'm more than willing to talk it through with you. And I appreciate your time and listening, and thank you for teaching me so much. And I hope I've given back a little bit today. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gary and Rich and Mark and John. That was really good. And thanks for staying in the time limit. And yeah, I agree. There are definitely other topics that came out of this, questions that came up that we can look at further. We got plenty of time to do that. But thanks again to everyone. And yeah, look for an email for our next Geospatial Forum meeting, and which is in June 1st. Thanks all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.